Warning: this story contains graphic depictions of violence, murder, and psychological horror. It is not suitable for children or sensitive audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. I've lived in my Brooklyn brownstone for over 20 years now. It's an old building with creaky floorboards and drafty windows, but it's home. The neighborhood has changed a lot in the past 2 decades, gentrified with million-dollar condos and organic groceries, but I've held on to my little piece of the past. After my husband passed away, it was just me and my cat Matilda. We had our routines: coffee on the porch in the mornings, Jeopardy at 6 p.m. sharp. Nothing exciting, but I liked the predictability. It made me feel safe. That feeling of safety was shattered one autumn night. I awoke to the sound of footsteps downstairs, heavy, purposeful. Matilda hissed from her perch at the foot of the bed. My chest tightened. The footsteps moved toward the stairs. Someone was in my house. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. But before I could hit call, the power went out, plunging me into darkness. I gasped as the cold night air hit my skin. My bedroom door was now open. Heart pounding, I groped blindly along the nightstand for something to defend myself. My fingers closed around a pair of scissors. Clutching them to my chest, I slid out of bed and crept toward the door. A man's silhouette stood at the top of the stairs, just visible in the moonlight. Broad shoulders, work boots. He started down the hall toward me. I wanted to scream, but fear closed my throat. Helpless tears streamed down my face as the intruder approached. His hulking form was inches away when I swung out wildly with the scissors, a bellow of pain. In the dim light, I saw blood bloom on his forearm. He swore and grabbed my wrist, wrenching the scissors away. I thrashed against him, my screams finally tearing loose. His fist collided with my stomach, knocking the wind out of me. As I doubled over, wheezing, he dragged me toward the stairs. I clawed at the floorboards, sobbing, pleading for my life. But his grip was iron. At the top of the stairs, I glimpsed a way out. Just a few feet away, my bedroom window was open to the fire escape. Summoning every bit of strength, I drove my elbow into the man's ribs and lunged for the window. His hands grasped at the back of my nightgown, but I pulled free, tumbling out onto the fire escape landing. Without looking back, I raced down the slippery metal stairs into the alley below. I ran to the nearest 24-hour bodega and begged them to call the police. Soon, patrol cars with flashing lights converged on the brownstone. But when officers searched inside, there was no intruder to be found. No signs of forced entry. Nothing was disturbed or stolen. According to authorities, it was likely just a vivid nightmare. But I knew what I experienced. The attack was real. This man who had violated the sanctity of my home was still out there somewhere. I insisted they dust for prints, canvass the area, check security footage. As days turned into weeks with no leads, the police gradually stopped calling me back. I knew it was up to me to find answers. I replaced the flimsy locks on my doors and windows, set up cameras throughout the house, kept a hammer under my pillow and mace on my nightstand. I stayed up night after night, hyper-vigilant, waiting for the intruder to return. Late one evening, the silence was pierced by a window shutter banging in the wind. I jolted upright, ears straining. Almost instinctively, my fingers wrapped around the handle of the hammer. Creaking floorboards, the shutter banged again. My chest tightened. He was back. On shaky legs, I crept down the stairs, weapon poised to strike. Turning the corner into the kitchen, I saw the dark silhouette of a man trying to jimmy open the back door. With a primal scream, I lunged and swung the hammer with all my strength. A crack of bone. The intruder crumpled to the floor, wailing in pain. I stood over him trembling, ready to strike again. As neighbors rushed in and police lights flickered through the windows, realization slowly sunk in. The intruder was me, sleepwalking under the spell of my own paranoid delusions. The violence I had so feared had come from my own hands. I sunk to the floor, hammer slipping from my fingers. Sobs racked my body as the officers knelt beside me. Through tears, I recounted the vivid nightmare that had become my reality. The constant terror of the phantom intruder I was convinced was lurking within my own home. As I was loaded into the ambulance, strapped down for my own protection, I knew my life would never be the same. The brownstone held too many ghosts now, real and imagined. I had violated those rooms, corrupted their innocence forever. Sometimes our own minds can become unfamiliar and terrifying landscapes, capable of creating monsters far more disturbing than any real intruder. I let obsession consume me, and couldn't see that the only danger lurking inside that house was myself. I know to some, none of it will seem real. But I know what happened those nights. Even if it only happened in my head, I still catch glimpses of that imagined intruder from the corner of my eye. But I refuse to let the delusions win again. My mind is my sanctuary and my prison, and only I hold the key. I live in New York City, the most populous and vibrant city in the United States. You would think that living in such a place would make you feel safe and secure, surrounded by millions of people and countless opportunities. But you would be wrong. There is a dark side to this city, a side that most people never see or even imagine, a side that I wish I never encountered. It all started when I moved into a new apartment in Manhattan, near Central Park. It was a nice place, spacious and modern, with a great view of the park. I was happy to find such a bargain, especially in this expensive city. The landlord was a friendly old man named Mr. Jones, who lived on the ground floor. He told me that the previous tenant had moved out suddenly, without giving any notice or reason. He said he didn't mind, as long as I paid the rent on time and kept the place clean. I moved in with my belongings and settled in quickly. I liked the apartment. It felt cozy and comfortable. I didn't have any problems or complaints until one night when I heard a strange noise coming from the closet in my bedroom. It was around midnight, and I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep. I heard a faint scratching sound like nails on wood. I thought it was maybe a mouse or a rat, but then I heard something else. A low moan like someone in pain or distress. It sounded human, but not quite. I got up and turned on the light. I walked towards the closet, feeling nervous and curious. I opened the door and looked inside. There was nothing there except for my clothes and shoes. No sign of any animal or person. I checked the walls and the floor, looking for any holes or cracks. Nothing. I closed the door and went back to bed, thinking that maybe it was just my imagination or a dream. But then I heard it again. The scratching and the moaning, louder and more urgent. It sounded like it was coming from right behind the closet door. I got up again and opened the door, expecting to see something this time, but there was still nothing there. Just empty space and silence. I was confused and scared. What was going on? Was I losing my mind? Was there something in the closet that I couldn't see? Or was there something else in the apartment that was making these noises? I decided to call Mr. Jones, the landlord, and ask him if he knew anything about this. Maybe he had some explanation or solution. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then I heard his voice, but not from the phone, from the closet. "Hello," he said. I dropped the phone and screamed. I scrambled backward as Mr. Jones emerged from the closet, his eyes burning with sinister intent. My mind reeled. How was this possible? He laughed menacingly at my shock. Surprised to see me? I have ways in and out of these units no one knows about. His smile turned predatory. All the better to keep an eye on pretty young tenants like you. I felt sick, realizing he had been watching me all along. I tried to run, but he grabbed my arm, wrenching me back. "Don't fight this, sweetie. You belong to me now." I smashed my elbow into his face, breaking loose as he bellowed in pain. I raced for the front door, but found it chained from outside. Heart pounding, I rushed to the window facing the fire escape. Just as I wrestled the window open, I felt Mr. Jones's hot breath on my neck. His fist closed around my hair. I twisted sharply, shoving us both through the open window onto the fire escape, which shook dangerously. We struggled violently, teetering on the edge. With a final surge of desperation, I elbowed him hard in the gut. He toppled over the railing with a yell, plummeting 15 stories to the alley below. I collapsed in shock, my body trembling. Police later found imprints in the dust behind the closet wall, along with photos of me. Mr. Jones had created secret crawl spaces to access tenants' units, but he would never terrorize anyone again. I soon moved far away, but paranoia lingers, because sometimes evil disguises itself in the most ordinary forms and places. I grew up in a sprawling suburb outside of Houston, Texas. Endless cul-de-sacs and cookie-cutter neighborhoods as far as the eye could see. The kind of place where nothing ever happens and kids complain of boredom. But one quiet summer night when I was 12 years old, that monotony was shattered in a way I'll never forget. My parents were going out to dinner with some friends that evening, leaving me home alone for a few hours. As an only child, I was used to entertaining myself, playing video games, reading, watching TV. I assured my parents I'd be fine on my own. The neighborhood was safe and our house had an alarm system. What could go wrong? After they left, I fed our golden retriever Buddy and let him out in the backyard to play. I settled down on the couch with a bowl of cereal and flipped aimlessly through channels. Typical boring Friday night. Outside, Buddy was barking excitedly. His ball must have gone over the fence into the neighbor's yard again. Annoyed, I went to let him back in. But when I pulled open the back door, Buddy came racing past me, snarling viciously. I peered out into the dusky backyard. Our fence gate was wide open, the latch broken cleanly off. Buddy had never acted like this before. Heart racing, I shut and locked the back door. I tried to convince myself it was just a stray dog that had wandered into our yard and spooked Buddy. But deep down I knew better. We were not alone. I shut off all the lights and crept quietly through the house, baseball bat in hand. In the darkened living room, I paused to listen. That's when I heard it, the sound of glass cracking. A window broke somewhere inside the house. Paralyzed by fear, I stood shaking in the darkness. Suddenly, heavy footsteps creaked down the hall toward me. I scrambled behind the couch just as a large figure lumbered into the living room, silhouetted in the dim moonlight. A man's ominous voice cut through the silence. Come out, wherever you are." Blood pounded in my ears. I didn't dare breathe or move a muscle, but it was too late. I heard his footsteps round the corner of the couch. Heavy hands grabbed me and I let out a scream that was abruptly muffled. Duct tape pressed tightly over my mouth. I thrashed violently as the intruder pinned me down and bound my wrists and ankles with rope. Helpless tears streamed down my face as the man threw me over his shoulder and carried me upstairs. In my bedroom, he tied me to a chair and ripped the tape off my mouth. I shrieked at the top of my lungs until his hand clamped down over my lips. "Scream again and you die," he snarled, hot breath on my face. He pulled a knife from his belt and trailed it lightly down my cheek. "We're going to have some fun, just you and me. A little game I like to call, how much blood can you lose before you pass out?" He pressed the knife into my forearm, drawing a trickle of blood. I whimpered in pain. "Please," I croaked. "Do whatever you want to me, just leave and don't hurt my family when they get home." I realized then that my nightmare was just beginning, and only I could ensure it ended before my parents walked into this man's twisted trap. His eyes lit up. "We've got plenty of time before Mom and Dad come to the rescue," he sneered. He left the room, returning a moment later with Buddy bound and gagged. My beloved dog thrashed in terror. The man held the knife to Buddy's throat. "Now the fun really starts," he said with a sick grin. "We're going to play a little game of choice. Who dies? You or your precious pup?" Everything faded away except the pounding of my heart. I looked into Buddy's panicked eyes. Eyes that trusted me, relied on me, loved me unconditionally. I knew what I had to do. "Me," I whispered hoarsely. "Kill me." The man chuckled. "How noble. Guess you really do love your dopey dog," he mocked. He dropped Buddy to the floor and grabbed my face with his meaty hand. "Ready for our next game?" As his knife traced down my stomach, ready to spill my guts, the room was suddenly flooded with blinding light. "Freeze! Hands up!" officers shouted, weapons drawn on the intruder. In the confusion, Buddy bit down hard on the man's leg while I landed a sharp kick straight to his groin. He collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. The police explained that a neighbor had noticed the broken fence and called 911. As they dragged the moaning intruder away, relief washed over me. My parents raced into the room and I collapsed, sobbing into their arms. My nightmare was over. I'll never forget staring into the crazed eyes of a killer moments from taking my last breath, but I also won't forget the love and courage awakened in me that night. Though darkness tried to extinguish the light, my soul burned bright enough to overcome. Evil exists, but inner strength does too, even when we don't know it yet.